Welcome back, everybody, to episode 39 of the Gen Z podcast. This week, we are talking about food, a very important topic, one that affects everybody alive. We talk about the statistics of food, why there's a growth in sugar and processed foods, and then some potential solutions. So stick around, it's going to be a good one.
The Gen Z podcast. 4 voices, unfiltered opinions on today's topics. We welcome you to speak freely and think deeply about today's episode.
Everyone, welcome back to the Gen Z podcast, where we talk about topics impacting our generation and talk with people of our generation making a difference. We are talking about a topic that impacts everyone, which is food. Our different opinions, beliefs, and tendencies when it comes to food, but our goal today is to look at facts and discuss solutions for what is going on with the food system right now. I'm Gavin Farnan, and with me is Zachary Crilly and Micah McNeil. Let's dive in. Food is a big topic, right? But we're going to start off with some pretty crazy numbers that we want to set the stage with. And first off is that 71% of the foods in your average grocery store are ultra processed. Processed foods is altering the natural state of any food. So essentially, cutting an apple in half would be processing the food. But ultra processed food is basically taking that to the next level and adding foods that would never actually exist in nature, or stripping foods of their nutritional value using huge machines to create the foods, things like that. 81% of these foods are grocery stores. So let me just share with you. That actually impact the way we eat? And the answer is yes. So 63% of our nutritional daily consumption on average is from processed foods. And then only 25% is from animal food and 12% from plant food on average. So that just goes to show how much of an impact that what is available to us has on our daily decision making. Between 1999 and 2018, the amount of processed foods consumed by kids and teens, that's 2 to 19 years old, jumped from 61% to 67%. And that's not just the US, it's the UK as well. Around 60% of what they are eating is coming from highly processed foods as well. It's an international issue, but moving into a different topic of just this illusion of choice from these companies that are putting these foods into grocery stores. Basically, 80% of the most common foods are supplied by 4 companies. So basically, each of these food companies is just owned by a giant conglomerate. So we have PepsiCo, Nestle, Coca-Cola, all of these huge brands. You can see under them all of the most popular food brands. So it might look like you have all of these variety of options, but in reality, it's just coming from these couple, maybe 5 to 7 companies buying all of these different foods. Is extremely interesting. But to make matters worse, diabetes is now the 7th leading cause of death in America. 90 and 2010, the number of people living with diabetes more than tripled, and new cases doubled every year. And that goes to show that our sugar consumption is just through the roof. As you can see, it was basically non-existent in the 1800s, and right around the beginning of 1900s, that just skyrocketed. And it continues to increase from here. And United States taking the cake. I don't know if we want to be in the number 1 position on this chart, but essentially we're averaging 500 calories per day from sweeteners. And that's the most out of any country, which is pretty alarming. But these are the numbers. We wanted to show you that to just set the stage for this topic. But guys, what do you think about these numbers, and Did you guys know about how long it was?
I mean, it's definitely pretty alarming. I feel like everyone's seen that last graphic that you showed of like the seven sort of companies that like basically own everything, right? Like you have Coca-Cola on there, Mars. I feel like everyone's seen this before, but actually talking about it and getting into it, it's literally a monopoly of these, seven companies that own literally, like you said, 80% of the food production in the United States. Some alarming stats that I think you alluded to is the 67% of, food and basically in the US consumption, the US diet is ultra processed, meaning it's food that's literally been altered that does not come from nature. I mean, just say that out loud, right? It sounds, insane. You wouldn't believe it. And I think you're going to get it, into it a little bit later and I can't wait to discuss it. But the correlation between the food that you eat and the way that you feel is paramount. And we wonder why we have such a, big depression and mental health and anxiety. And a lot of it has to do with the food that we're putting into our body. So, that paradigm is something that, we need to discuss. And I can't wait to bring up someone later who talks about this a lot, and he was called a conspiracy theorist for a lot of things he said, but now he's right, and no one's gonna give him his flowers. So that's my quick.
A hallmark, an absolute hallmark of capitalism is competition. Look at this chart. Does this scream competition to you? It certainly doesn't to me. This is ridiculous. Of course, these brands are going to cut corners and put processed additives in the food that they make. They have nobody to compete against, or their competitors are other huge companies. Is it a problem? Certainly. Huge problem. The statistics bear it out. I really look forward to discussing the solutions. Anecdotally, I think that it's something that we all know about. I certainly know about in my life. Um, but it's an area where there's a lot of intentional confusion around food and what's healthy, what's not healthy. Um, so that stinks. I mean, because it is such a pivotal part of your life. It's what you're putting into your body. It's going to have a massive effect on your mood and quality of life. So I look forward to talking about the solutions and how to move forward because this system is certainly broken and there needs to be change.
Evan, you said something about diabetes being the seventh leading cause of death in the U.S.,
Wow.
right? And that number tripled, right? What was the time period in which it tripled?
90 to 2010, it tripled, and from 1990 to 2010, doubled every year. So basically, the number is just compounding and compounding, and we wonder why. Because of this choice. We don't have a choice. I This is one thing before we talk solutions, I want to talk about do you do you guys think you have a choice if you wanted to start a healthy diet, if you want to take out all the bad stuff in your diet, what you eat day to day? Like, do you think you have the ability to do that? And then talk about people maybe not as fortunate as us and just don't have the money, or the grocery store down the road has worse quality foods. But do you guys think with the information available, with the options you have, you could?
So it's actually very interesting. I'm actually someone who's very conscious of what they put in their body and tries to be extremely healthy. Even so, like when you go and you really buy healthy stuff, like I think like there's often talks about like what's the most optimal diet, whether it be like paleo or keto or carnivore or like sort of a Mediterranean. And I don't think there's a perfect answer. I think you got to find what's best for you. I think personally, like I'm someone who's like very conscious of what they put into their body, and even when I like do buy the most healthiest stuff, a lot of what it has to do, and it's sort of that first slide that you showed with the 67, or it was about, I think, like 63% of like refined like oils and stuff like that. So that's canola oil, vegetable oil, seed oils, various different types of oils that are really terrible for you and aren't natural. They literally come out of a chemical lab and they're very addictive, right? We showed the stat about, sugar. And sugar consumption. Sugar is one of the most addictive, and we know this. Like we intuitively like know that sugar is very addictive, but yet it's in everything we eat. A Gatorade bottle, right? Like one of those 18-ounce bottles. And this is crazy to think of. A human, like a male, right, like our age, is only supposed to have 33 grams of sugar a day. There is 34 grams of sugar literally in that 18-ounce bottle of Gatorade. And it's like addictive. Like it's super addictive. So I know I'm going on like a little bit of a tangent here, but it's crazy to think. So, I think me personally, like someone who, I don't have any responsibilities, right? The only thing I got to take care of is my dog and myself. Um, so I can afford to buy like single ingredient food and pretty healthy food. But and I think we'll get into it. For a lot of people, it's a complete opposite. What are you going to tell a mom that doesn't have grocery stores near her when she has like the local deli to go buy a couple of chopped cheeses for her kids? Like, what are you going to tell her, right? So, I think personally I'm fine, but most people it's definitely it's hard. I'm not even perfect. And I literally invest so much money into what the food that I buy, and I'm still not where I want to be.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think there's just so much confusion. I feel confused, and again, I'm somebody like you're talking about, Micah, who's invested time and energy into learning about food and the processing of food. I do very much think it's a generational thing. I think Gen Z is much more conscious of this, and that the pendulum is shifting from the graphs that you've shown. It might take a while to be borne out in the data, but I want to highlight on the trend. If this had happened overnight, it would be a national emergency. I mean, it is. People are dying. You said it's the seventh leading cause of death. People are dying from this. This is no joke. And it kind of just is. It feels like a slow burn because it's developed over these years and chemical upon chemical. But it's a pretty dramatic thing. It's not it needs to be addressed and taken care of. And I really think that our generation is going to do a lot of progress. To answer your question, if you can, 100%. I'm a strong believer in personal autonomy and the ability for us to make our lives better. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is it going to be challenging? Yeah. But is it possible? Definitely.
My soapbox for a second, but I think this is the most important topic that is facing us right now because I mean, one, we have a monopoly on the food industry, and we don't know what is good and what's bad because there's so much information going on, so it's just so difficult to make a decision. So I'm a person that experiments with diet basically every month it feels like, and I did strip out every food. I mean, I don't I hesitate to say it because people think I'm weird, but I did the carnivore diet for 3 months and literally eating meat for 3 months, 90 days with meat, salt, water, and I never felt better. I it's a testament to the confusion, one, and two, the different ingredients going into these foods. The fact that I can live and thrive off of just beef for months goes to show that none of these other bullshit ingredients are very necessary for your body. So there's an aspect to this where the trend of advertisements for fast food, like every break all today, for example, it's like Carl's Jr. with like this big beefy beautiful burger, and it's great, but I'm not sure how good it is for you. Or like Doritos, I how healthy can that be for you? And their campaigns like Got Milk campaign, good for you, I'm not even sure. Or like eat breakfast every morning. The cereal aisle is probably the worst aisle for
So
you.
true.
The nutritional value you get from these cereals, Lucky Charms, Cheerios, like even boxes have a heart on it saying lower your cholesterol, sugar, it has these processed ingredients, it has all of this bullshit that is not gonna be what gets you better health, better longevity, whatever, lower inflammation, like all of those things that they promise, but that's what we're eating, and people aren't getting any healthier. So it's this whole recurring cycle that I think is going to be the biggest topic for us. And as Zach said, all of these effects are they take a while to show that it's hard to get the data. Like you need a double blind case study to make any good decisions on it.
I do. I don't think that's true. I like I mean, the stats are glaring. I mean, you alluded to it earlier. I mean, 1 in 3 people are obese, right? I think it's like 1 in 4 kids are like pre-diabetic. Like, how are you 5 years old and
Crazy.
pre-diabetic already, right? Like, so
Terribly
I
sad,
think,
really.
yeah, no, I mean, I think the data's there. I just think it's more of like what sort of alluded to at the beginning when brought up when you're watching football. Like, if you go to commercials, I want our viewers to do this this week. But when you're watching anything, right, I guarantee that the two most commercial like the two topics that you'll see the most in commercials are either related to the pharmaceutical industry or they're related to the big food industry, right? So what happens is, you know, big food, they feed you all this processed food and then your they just hand your soul over to the big pharmaceutical industry. And that's literally what happens. Those are the go anyone can go look this up. Those are the two industries that spend the most money on TV advertisement, right? So this stuff is glaring, and it's like you have a society that's morphing into just you have almost, and then you have pop culture too. That's like another like just like ingredient in the soup, where it's like we are creating like sort of this sphere where it's like almost like justified or it's like okay be overweight and it's not, and that's a different conversation. I don't think there's much merit there because, I really think that the food is really messed up and people don't really have a choice, you know. Like, Gavin, I know you mentioned that you did the carnivore diet. Like, I ain't ever doing that shit. You know what I mean? But I really respect it, right? And I think it's like important for everyone like to find out. But that works for Gavin. That's all that
Yeah.
matters, right? But I think it's important that anyone, if you have the ability to find the most optimal diet that works for you. Because I'll tell you one thing, I am healthy as a bitch. I'll go ahead and have some vanity on the pod real quick. I'm healthy as a bitch. But I use ChatGPT almost every single day to be like, what is in this? Can I eat this? And is this like, is it a, low glycemic index and all this shit? Is it satiating? What are the macros on this? Like, I'm big into it. So I can only imagine like what's being, shown to someone on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok about health stuff. So yeah, sorry, it was long-winded, but you're right. I think this is the most paramount topic that, that faces our generation and world right
We'll get deep in depth as to all of our personal approaches too, because I think it's helpful for people to hear that. But you're right; they want you fat, sick, and nearly dead, because that's when you're a good consumer, you know. Um, and to take it away from the proverbial they, because I don't think that that's a helpful mindset to have when you're thinking of solutions, especially in something that's obviously so pervasive for everybody. Um, in this case, I really do think that the responsibility and why it's gotten so bad is on these companies, on those 7 companies that you showed, I mean, all their subsidiaries.
Let's move forward to a different kind of cause as well. Like
What do you want to talk?
we've established the fact that it's messed up, right? So
It's messed up.
so that's been
So what do we
established.
do?
I mean there's another cause I want to talk about, which is just human psychology and shift from cooked meals, getting food from the grocery store, coming home, cooking it, to food, and just the quickness of meals now and the satisfaction you get from the meals. Because let's be these foods are engineered with amount of sugar in them, with the amount of macronutrients, micronutrients, like all of those are engineered satisfying and addictive as possible. So it's not only the food companies at fault, but it's also the individual, because if you have a little discipline, you can refrain from doing it. But at the same time, it's very difficult because yes, that Pringles chip has been engineered to be the optimal crunchiness, the optimal amount of salt on there, so you just get that burst of flavor. Huge cost this, and like how big a cause do you think this is in of the psychology towards it, like how people are thinking about food and just it's so quick and easy now? Where does
And
that go?
what I'll say is like, let's be honest here. Like carbs taste good, like right? Like ice cream tastes good, pizza tastes good, bread and a little bit of olive oil and pasta, like at the Italian spot, like that tastes good. Who doesn't want that, right? But you're right. A little bit of onus does have to be on the individual, right? So I think it's like two separate buckets that we're talking about. One, we're just talking about a industry that's just totally corrupt, right? Where we sort of started with the company. Now we're sort of transitioning towards talking about the onus on the individual. And I think it is very important. To have discipline in when you eat, but I don't want to be prescriptive here. Like we all intrinsically know that. So like beating down on that horse and talking about like what we do and like what's like the optimal way, I think is a wrong way of going at it. But I do think there is a lot to the psychology of it where it's like, and I think this is where you were sort of trying to get into where it's like, I think it's important for you to go like cook your own food or, not get Uber Eats every day, but it's so with technology, right? It enables us to do things more efficiently, right? Like I always love Peter Thiel's framing of that. And it's that's what, Uber Eats, DoorDash has enabled us to do where it's like, I just worked all day. Kids are annoying. Let's just order some food. But meanwhile, you don't know what the hell is in most of those ingredients that, that are good and your kids are going to like it. But, it's going to have these adverse, long-term consequences. So a couple buckets.
Anything there? I have another cause I want to get into as well.
Go.
Third part is really just the education around food, which I think is the huge gap that is causing this misalignment of what consumers are expecting and what the companies are producing. But essentially, this confusion leads to them profiting. Like their ability to fund studies, one, that if you look at or a lot of the studies that are being posted, they're funded by food companies. And there's many ways to make a study very ambiguous or say what you want. And then two is just the lack of to be informed. Like for one, I have this app that scans the barcode of every UP label on a food product, and it shows me a list of ingredients. It's called Yuka, if any listeners are interested.
I
And
use it.
Yuka
I
is
use Yuka.
amazing. Yuka is awesome. They will list out all the ingredients, give you a rating for the food, give you studies that connect to each ingredient. So there are ways of education, but it's just about getting that in front of people. So Mike or Zach, what do you think about educating consumers and the best way to do so?
Yeah, it's so funny. You were like listening at like how these food companies are like the ones like paying for their own studies. It like reminds me of the time like when like concussions were a really big thing in the NFL, and then the NFL paid for the study on concussions, and it's like seems like some conflict of interest, but maybe we'll save it for another conversation. But yeah, it's so true. Um, yeah, no. So I think at education level, that's something that and now I've heard of like a lot of people that I like really respect Scott Galloway, Jonathan Hyatt, Naval Ravikant like really speak about this. To me it should start at an educational level. Like that is something that is very paramount. Like health and nutrition should be something that is taught from adolescence all the way up to pre-adulthood, I think, right? And then, I think the latter point about like software like Yuka, I'm using this thing called Cal AI right now that just scans your food, or you'd like do the barcode and it tells you like the macros and all that stuff. And it's pretty good. So the technology is there. But I think to your point, it's like we need to make it more, widespread. And I think there is like a sort of like a counterculture of, maybe it's the minority right now, but I think it's eventually getting there, where there is like a wholeness of like, at least the discourse around public health and nutrition and being a healthy person is coming along. So I think it's getting there. But can I just list this one stat? It's very sad to me. But people who are on snaps, right? And essentially what that is for our viewers, that's people who are on food stamps. The number one purchase item on food stamps is soda. Soda. It takes up, I think it's like 43% of all the purchases on food stamps, right? So that's people who already like can't afford groceries on themselves and need, need not a handout, but assistance from the government, which is a great thing. But when like you're allowing those people to then go buy shit, and then that correlates to why they're so unhealthy and anxious and depressed, and their life is, for lack of a better word, pretty terrible. And it's like, oh well, there has to be some correlation there. I know that was off topic, but I think it's important. So I think technology is enabling us there, and then the discourse is getting there, and then the culture is getting there. Sort of back to this like, let's keep our nutrition and healthiness at like the top of us, because I think like Confucius has a great line. It's a sick man wants one thing, a healthy man wants 1,000 things. It's one of those like it's one of those like mic drop quotes, because it's like if you're healthy you want all these things, but if you're unhealthy you only want one thing. So, I think it's very important to change the discourse where it's like your health, your personal health is the thing that you should be most focused on. Literally, like be selfish about your health. And then you can get to everything else. You can, care about someone else. You can care about trying to make the world a better place, but be healthy with yourself and be good on yourself, and then try to get to everything else. So discourse, technology, I think we're getting there. Sorry, another long-winded, but I love this topic. I think it's very important.
And I do think the first phase is that education. And I'd love to see this number drop, but 70% of school cafeteria foods is ultra processed. So kind of just the starting point is just, okay, what are kids learning now and what are kids building habits around? Because that's what food is. It's a habit. Like what you're used to is what you'll continue to do. So if that's what we're making kids start with, I mean, that foundation to pull back on and to make your own decision just is that much harder. So I think the education is kind of phase one, but then phase two is like policy and advocacy around food. So what do you guys think about the government's place in this topic and what could they do?
Yes, 100%. I think that there's a wide variety of potential legislative solutions, some that make sense and some that don't. One is scaling back the subsidies. We see a massive increase in things like high fructose corn syrup because there's massive subsidies on corn and other producing other ingredients that might not get produced if not for those subsidies. So scaling those back is one. Another one is I would love for there to be more regulation around labeling. What if like that yuca, excuse my dog in the background. What if that like yuca style like traffic light, you know how they do it? What if you were required to put that on your food labels and be more transparent? Things like these claims like low fat, natural, there should be greater regulation on who can use those and vetting processes for that. I think that that will go a long way in education, and because I mean some people don't, but I think for the most part people want to eat healthy. It's just confusing and people don't have the time to really like look into all these ingredients. That's another thing that I think is a no-brainer is banning ingredients that are banned in other countries. Things like potassium bromide is banned in the EU, but it's still out here. And there's ties and studies that say it's a possible carcinogen. Um, I am now going to give an example of what I think is bad legislation, and that's the Bloomberg soda ban in 2012. Then Mayor of New York City, Mike Bloomberg, tried to ban soda over 16 ounces. It's a sugary thing. It's not good for people. So he wanted to ban it. I don't think that that's the way to go. I think that that's kind of like big brother nanny state. I think that people have to have the ability to make decisions for themselves. And actually, the New York Supreme Court didn't let that go through. So instead of going in the restrictive, like government saying, no, you can't do this, I would love to see the focus be on education, like we've been talking about, and on the true free market and scaling back these subsidies.
Knew you were gonna say it. I knew you were gonna say the free market. I don't think it applies in this case, but I think what you said at the beginning is no brainers. We shouldn't have food that's banned everywhere else but allowed here. That should just be a no brainer. Flip the switch. Let's change that policy, right? But yes, I think labeling, that should be something that is literally, we need government to do that. A Cliff Bar. Like, we think Cliff Bars are like good for us. Cliff Bars are terrible for us. They're so bad for us, and we don't even know. Like, I see a Cliff Bar and it's right. Like, you were talking about it earlier, Gavin. But like the advertisement marketing me, like even like the Got Milk thing. Like, I was drinking oat milk for so long. Like, oat milk is like bad for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like. So, I think there's like no brainer policies that we could definitely implement. But to Zach, to give you credit about the free market, I don't think there should be like oh, you can't do this anymore, right? Like, that takes away from the MO of, the precipice, the value proposition of what the United States is. So we shouldn't restrict people, but we should definitely make people aware, and we shouldn't be hiding it from them. I think those are no-brainer things that we should be able to implement instantaneously. And if we want to get into that, make America healthy again. FK Jr.
Oh, new
Sure.
campaign slogan for Micah.
I mean, we at the end of the day, we vote for our dollars as we always have in America, and I think it does come down to giving people the information that is needed to make that decision. But then what would you guys say to the person on food stamps and they only have a very limited number of options, but are still making the poor decisions? I mean, they lack information, and then there's a whole lot to choose from because the amount of money they're given. But I think that, like, in future, maybe decade down the road or 20 years down the road, how do you think technology plays a role in like giving them a broader selection of healthy foods or solution oriented towards them?
So I don't think the technology would apply that in that specific case that much. It would just be like the incentives. Like, they're allowed, families who are using snaps, food stamps, are allowed to use it on soda. Whereas like you probably shouldn't. Right? Like, maybe it should be like what is subsidized under stamps is like actual good nutrient dense satiating food that is good for, a mom or a dad and their family, not Coca-Cola, which is, actively like the number one thing that people are buying on snaps. So, I think it's stuff like that. I'm trying to think of technology, where technology could really get involved, because at the end of the day, like, people are going to the grocery store and they're making the decisions for the food that they want. I don't know where like technology really like changes that. I think it's really just about growing the discourse, doing exactly what we're doing right now, and really showing people that like there is, if you don't eat good food, one, you're probably on pace to be diabetic, and then two, you're gonna live a shorter life. Full stop. Right? And if we can make that like, we can show people healthier options that are also good. Like, healthy food is good. Like, it's just like we don't really know. Like, everyone just wants the carbs and, the ice cream. And like I like it too, man. I cheat too, man. I cheated yesterday. I cheated yesterday, dude. It was crazy. And I felt like shit the next day, so I did something about it. But, that's for another discussion.
Yeah, and I don't think it's about being perfect. I think it's just about moving in the right direction, and a big part of it is education. And to answer your question, Gavin, and also to give a shout out, I want to highlight a Gen Z person that's taking action on this. Can you see my screen? Yeah. This girl, Haley Thomas, 22-year-old, she has educated over 1,000 school children on healthy eating. This is like literally the perfect example of what we need. More people like this going into their community and having the discussion and educating people. Because I really think people want to do good. They just need to know how and have the tools to do it. So shout out to Haley, Gen Z leader, making a positive impact in this space.
Shout out. And just one last thing, if anybody's interested in kind of technologies around this space, is vertical farming, which is basically bringing foods closer to grocery stores. Growing the food, if not inside of a grocery store, and the supply would be shortened to a couple feet opposed to halfway around the globe. So I think that's going to be a big technology that shifts in our generation is farming. One, it supplies more food per acre than any technology we have right now, and farms take up a large portion of the American. So an interesting topic, if anybody's curious to look up, is farming, what they're doing there, and just these technologies coming out. I'm excited to see some more, but Yuka is great if someone wants to download that and really get to know their food and what's going in their body. But I think we can end it there. If you guys don't
I,
have
I
any
want to
other,
I want to plug a couple of things too because I think all of my evolution in this space has come through experience. Um, I fast regularly. That has like really opened my eyes to how food affects me when I just stop intaking food for a period of time. Um, and also something that I think about as you're talking about vertical farming, there's been such a divorce between the source of food and where we get it. So even going through a process of like, you know, planting something and getting it from the garden. We have a fig tree in our backyard, and one of my favorite things is like going out in the morning and picking fresh figs. And it just like it really changes the way that I look at food.
in ideal state, I would love to just get all my food from like live off the land, just get a bunch of land and just get some cows, some pigs,
It's funny how circular
fruit.
everything is. Like our grandparents worked so much to like industrialized cities to have like high end grocery stores, and now our generation wants their dream is to go and have a farm with pigs and like a 1900s lifestyle. But there's something to that. That's how people have lived for like so many generations. It's now that's the new part, and it's not working.
Well, this was a great conversation. I mean, I really like this topic, and we can probably dig into this more. But again, people, it's always up to you. You have freedom of choice. You choose to eat potatoes or not. So, hopefully this was helpful, but gave you some solutions around it, and hopefully you use those. But until next time, thank you for listening.